this thing, which is just not on the level, where we have meetings and discussions and we're working through process, and when they decide they're not happy with the fact that at some point you've got to make a choice, they just all step back and say, well, the president needs to get this done. They need to do their job. Now's the time to go ahead and make the tough choices. That's why they're called leaders.
We're all watching it in the studio. Before I go over to Do O'Reilly, we're screaming, he is the leader. That's why they're called leaders. Oh, how dismissive. Then he went on to call them selfish. They're making selfish choices. Walking out all their gang of 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. Walking out on the American people. Senator Tom Coburn, also a medical doctor, of course, OBGYN. I mean, I guess, Senator, as a member of that original gang of 6, I guess you're not to be trusted. You're just we're going to call you Senator a walkout man now. How are you, Senator?
I'm fine. Hello, Laura.
Well, what did you make of that? I mean, that was really, I thought, typically low blow style politics from the president.
It's all about campaign. This whole, what I've told the president, if he'll stand up and lead the country and call things as he sees them, even though he doesn't agree, but quit playing the political game, quit trashing everybody and start talking about what our real problems are and that we need a solution and roll up his sleeves and do it. The fact is he should have been negotiating with these people for the last 4 or 5 months rather than create a sense of somebody's negotiating and moving the ball every time somebody gets close. I think it's all about the 2012 election, not anything about our problems.
Well, the president moved to do the usual demonize the enemy, and in this case, the enemy, both Republicans in Congress, and you heard the pejoratives just used, and also the prosperity class in the United States, otherwise known as the wealthy, the evil rich, now the new subclass of evil, super evil rich, corporate jet owners, which, of course, he forgot to say that he's the one who agreed to have continued corporate jet tax write-offs in place in law.
Yeah. Well, again, I think there can be some legitimate criticism of Congress, not the House. I think the House, they've got their appropriate bills done. They passed a budget. I think the criticism ought to lie in the Senate. We've done nothing in the Senate for 6 months except extend the Patriot Act. There's been nothing of consequence. We're facing the biggest difficult choices in our country's history. We haven't put a bill on the floor to cut spending. We haven't done anything to address that, and that's because Reid doesn't want his members to have to take any hard votes. And it's all the career politicians of both stripes want to get reelected more than they want to fix the country, and so that criticism is legitimate. But the leader of our country is the president, and he sets the tone. And when he's been inattentive and not in the game until this last week, I don't think he can he can't throw any darts at anybody else, given his travel plans and his campaigning, rather than working on the real issues in front of our country. And all the politicians are guilty. Too many of us think too much about the next election instead of the next generation.
Well, I think that's music to the ears of a lot of folks out there. And Senator, look, to be successful, you also have to be a politician who is credible and believable on these issues, and then you can get your policies through, and you have a lot of influence, and you can help the folks. That's just the way it is. And
the other thing
let me just finish my thought. And the one thing we know. Given the fact that the president spent and devoted a lot of time in this speech attacking basically you and the rest of the Senate and the House Republicans, I think we have to acknowledge that when you add up the golfing outings, the campaign trips, the celebrity parties at the White House, you add it all up over the last 6 months, I pretty much think there are a lot more hours spent doing that than the total of 6 hours he spent with the caucuses on the Hill. 6 hours.
Yeah. Well, I think if you want to work a deal, the last thing you do is keep putting your finger in their eye and publicly, and then go try to work a deal. What he needs to do is calm down his rhetoric and roll up his sleeves and call in McConnell and Boehner and Reid and say, "Okay, guys, let's stay here till we get something worked." By doing what he's doing and demagoguing people and situations, it doesn't heal our country. People in our country are anxious, Laura. I don't care if they're liberal or conservative. They're anxious. They're worried about our country. And division is not what we need now. We need unification, because the threat to us is greater than any other threat we have. And to play the political game with it, to me, is extremely disappointing.
He challenged you, all of you, on your upcoming vacation. Let's listen.
They're in 1 week, they're out 1 week, and then they're saying Obama's got to step in. You need to be here. I've been here. I've been doing Afghanistan and bin Laden and the Greek crisis, and you stay here. Let's get it done.
Your response?
Again, I think it's the same old deal. Is when you're pointing a finger at somebody else, usually you got four pointing back at you. And again, I don't think the criticism helps him develop a deal. All he does is make people angry. He's right. It's not about being here. It's about when we're here, are we doing anything? He misses that whole point. It's been over 2 years since a budget's been offered in the Senate. We don't control the Senate. We haven't had any substantive votes. I mean, yesterday we had a vote to try to get some transparency on duplication in the federal government, something the president supposedly wants. And all the key members, the leadership of the Democratic Party, defeated that. We got 63 votes. We needed 65 based on the numbers that were there to just know what we're doing about duplication. But no, we don't want to do that. So, I think our problem in this country is careerism at all levels, and it changes people's motivation rather than for the best of the country to them. And I don't see any difference in that and what the president's pointing out about himself.
So he needs you.
It's
you
about
all
his next election. What all this is about. This is a political campaign he's in, rather than a policy campaign for what is best for our country right now. And he's dividing us rather than bringing us together. Even if you believe everything he's put out of his mouth yesterday in his speech, why say that publicly when you've got to go get in a room with people to try to solve a problem?
Well, it certainly seems counterproductive, especially when you're lecturing people about not spending time in Washington and not focusing. And as we learned today, after his weekly private lunch with Joe Biden, he's going to Philadelphia for the entire afternoon to do another 2 re-election fundraisers.
Yeah, I think he's traveled more than any other president, been out of the country more than any other president in the same period of time, utilized his plane more, done more campaigning at this stage than probably anybody else, and yet we've accomplished very little towards solving the very real problems that are in front of us. They're urgent problems. I mean, the best way for the president to get reelected, in my mind, would to talk with the American people, be truthful with them, don't be partisan, say, here's the things we're going to do, I'm going to go roll up my sleeves and work to get this solved. And he'd be a hero if he actually got it done. But this campaign rhetoric of dividing people and class warfare, what is wrong with big corporations having corporate jets to get their executives where you're paying them this money, you want them to be efficient. That's all about the next election. That doesn't have anything to do with the facts. And plus, he supported it with the last tax bill in December of this last year. It wasn't an issue. So, to me, it's unfortunate that the president's listening to his campaign and political people rather than his policy people.
And we find out today that the public believes that the president is not leading on the economy. Many say the economy is in permanent decline, and asked if the federal government should spend money to create jobs. Only a slim majority said no, but that's pretty good. It should focus on lowering the debt. It was 52% said no. I think that's pretty good, given the way the poll question was asked.
Well, the biggest problem, Laura, is the government is inhibiting the creation of jobs. You've had 40% more regulation. Every business out there, when I travel across the country or in Oklahoma, the number one complaint I get is, why would I invest any more here? When all I got to do, every time I turn around, I got to fill out 150 pages for some government bureaucracy and prove I'm innocent rather than them say I'm doing something wrong. Instead, I'll just invest somewhere outside of the country. I don't have all this problem. I can produce it less and I can ship into this country. The biggest job killer right now in this country is the regulations of this administration.
Only 20% of the country now say the economy is getting better. 20%.
Well, I think they're right. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. But it doesn't have to. When you have $2 trillion plus sitting on the sidelines here in this country, major corporations and medium-sized corporations who say, I'm not going to invest this in new products, new production, because I can't with clarity see that there's a potential for me to get a good return on it. So our problem is there's a lack of clarity and confidence out there in terms of the policies of this government, the taxing of this government, and the debt of this government. And what we need is real leadership to stand up and say, we understand we have to live within our means. We're going to make the difficult choices. We're going to ask everybody to share in that, including corporate America, but everybody's going to share in that, and that's so we can create prosperity in the future. We're about creating prosperity. We're not about whacking people over the head on political statements when it is convenient, and then go in a room and say, oh, you guys know the game. I just have to do this. It's about my 12 election. The fact is the country doesn't have time for politics anymore.
Well,
we better get it together or we're down the tubes.
Here's one thing that I'll say about your statement about if we don't have time for politics. At the same time, Senator, is it not true that this is a reelection cycle? And Republicans, I think some of the things you said on this program today need to be heard a lot and from a lot of people on Capitol Hill as to what this president is doing, because he has to be stopped. This has to be stopped. This type of spending approach to every problem we have, and the demonization of good people and good people who actually employ and spend money and keep this economy going, instead of demonizing classes of Americans. And so I agree with you that, it's the policy ultimately that counts, but we also have to answer and put down the statements that I think for a lot of people who don't follow politics and maybe are dependent on the federal government, and that's a lot of people today, they might actually take to heart. So I like a lot of the stuff you said about, the fact is, MIA on leadership, MIA in negotiations, lecturing and demonizing, and meanwhile, the problem's getting worse by the day, not better.
That's right.
I think you have to say that. I think you all have to do some of the politics while you do all the good policy.
Well, but, politics, I'm new to politics relatively. I didn't ever intend to be here. I just ended up here. For certain aren't staying. This is my last term. I don't really like the situation. I don't like the politics surrounding it. But the fact is leadership trumps politics. He can say whatever he wants. If we have a great leader stand up and say, I'm going to define what the issues are in our country. The issues are we've undermined self-reliance. We have created dependency. We have failed to be transparent. We have used the government to advance individuals' career rather than use the government to advance the country's career. We need somebody to stand up and speak the truth into this country and defend. And the statements that he made will fall on deaf ears, because that's real leadership about bringing people together, not dividing them.
Well, Senator Tom Coburn, it's always great to talk to you. And, you're a gentleman, and you spent your whole life devoted to medicine. And in the health care reform debate, all these things that we've gone through as a country over the last 2 years, you've been front and center, and I really appreciate your service to this country, and I don't say that enough to you, but I really do appreciate it.
It's great visiting with you.
All right, you take care. Senator Dr. Tom Coburn, you take care. Have a good 4th.